Hi, welcome to another episode of You're in Charge Conversations that Spark Change. I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. Today's episode focuses on mindfulness. Now, before all of you click off and say, mindfulness, that's a bunch of kumbaya, bunch of hoo-ha. We need to be working. We can't be thinking about mindfulness and meditating while we have things to achieve. The problem is, with a lot of remote workforce and the pressure that all of us are under right now in this environment, there is a lot of burnout. There is a lot of reactive behavior in the workplace. There is a lot of people who are really suffering in silence in the remote workplace because they don't know how to connect with each other. They don't know what they should be doing. And the only thing they default to is just working harder on the same process, working longer, feeling burnt out. So what should you do? Well, today I brought Janet Fouts. She is an author on the subject of mindfulness and how to make sure that you are recharging your batteries in order to be more present for your workers, your families, and more important, yourself. Now you can say, well, how did this happen? Well, she ran a very high-powered digital agency in Silicon Valley for years until she hit the wall and realized that's not the way she needs to live. So she shares her journey, talks about what we can do to help ourselves in small, as she calls them, micro doses of mindfulness to be able to regain our footing, to be present for ourselves, present for our family, and achieve more, but do it in a much healthier way. So I'm really excited. This was a great episode, great conversation. So let's dive into it on You're in Charge Conversations that Spark Change with Janet Fouts. Okay, so Janet, I've been excited since I first heard about you. I started doing some research and I said, I think you are a perfect person to have on the show because I think it's really timely what you're talking about. And I really want to dive into your journey about how you got here. But the thing that stood out most, and I'd like to maybe start our conversation out about that, is this idea of many of us being disconnected remotely or just working more because we don't have to commute and do a lot of these things where maybe we had a little release, this sense of burnout where there's no time for reflection, communication. It just seems to be work, 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 work. So talk to me about that idea that you've been talking about, mindfulness and trying to regroup some of our self in the process.
Wow, is that a loaded question? There's a lot of stuff in that.
Yeah.
But I'll start out with, I've been working remotely since 2003, so kind of for a while. And for me, it was normal to work remotely. Even when I was managing my agency, we worked remote. We shut down the offices, in 98. So we pretty much, went remote. So the thing is that people think this is going to be easy. Even though it's been almost 2 years now, people are still thinking it should be easy for me to just work at home and everything's going to be easy. But we forget that we are completely out of our element in many, many cases. There's so many different things going on with us. We have other people in the home. We're trying to work in our home, which may be an unnatural environment. Right. And so we don't pay enough attention to that. And we forget that it's setting us off, that we're triggered by things because we're home and we're not in our office. I'm hearing from a lot of people that they're struggling with this because they're so used to the culture that they had in the office. Big offices, small offices, it doesn't matter. They had a culture and now they're kind of alienated from it. And as much as I love Zoom and I teach on Zoom a lot, it's not the be all end all.
No,
we have to think about how we're going to connect with people.
So there was something you said at the beginning, and I think it really applies to this. So 1998, that seems so long, way back.
I'm old.
Well, join the club. It's okay. But that idea that you made a conscious choice to shut down your office and move remote, which is intentional. So now when you're hiring people who either already feel that's the way I want to work or that's the way I best work, versus what happened to all of us. We were forced into this environment. So it's not something that we may be suited for long term, right? Short term, we can most people can do most anything or deal with most anything. So talk about that difference between that you've seen when you were consciously, intentionally saying, we're going remote, here's who we're going to hire, versus what you're seeing now from people that have been pushed into this, who may want to come back, but can't.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting to me, maybe to you, is that we got venture funding in 1996 and we opened our office. We hired all these people. We started a real agency, which was amazing and exciting and so much fun. And it kind of drove me crazy that, the way coders work, they want to work at home anyway. So they weren't doing a lot in the office. And then the dot-com crash happened. So it was really a financial decision to say, okay, we're running this office with all these computers and all these desks, and everybody's going home anyway, because that's where they do their best work at 3:00 in the morning. So, it was really a decision based on finance and just being smarter about how we ran our business. And so that's how we ended up there. But then I started meeting people that were contractors remotely, all in the US or Canada. And they all just said, I'm running my own business. I love what I do. I love where I work. And this is the way I want to do business.
Right.
And once I started really connecting with those people and helping to support their businesses, they supported my business. And, I've still got people that have worked with me for 20 years because they love what they do.
Right.
But now people are thrown off. They thought this working from home thing was going to be a piece of cake because it's comfortable. We're in our homes, but it isn't. We don't have the same setups. We miss the culture. It's hard to communicate. It's hard to keep relationships going. Whether you're in sales and you need relationships with your clients and you used to go to their offices, customer service people are struggling because they are not having the same connection amongst their team. They sit around in the office and talk to each other about, oh, somebody's having this problem. How do I solve that? Right. Now they've got to go through a lot of channels or a lot of Slack conversations in order to really get those answers for their client. So there's just been a lot of disconnects that, we're trying to gloss over, but they're there. And we really need to think about those. We need to think about how we're going to communicate with each other in a more mindful way to really stay human in the way that we work.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. When we decided last March of 2020 that we had to go home and be home, the woman who runs the day-to-day of the agency, she said to me, Glenn, would you be able to please do a presentation to our team about how to work at home? So I did a presentation about setting up a workspace and trying to maintain a schedule very similar to what you had in the office, meaning if you came into work at 8:30, well, make sure you're at your desk at 8:30 and take time for lunch and end at a certain time, because just because you can work all day or push it off or go back to your desk after work or after dinner doesn't mean you should. And it was really hard for some people, but they appreciated that. But one of the things, to your point, that we really had to remind them, and it sounds strange, we'd have to remind them to, did you take lunch? Did you stop and take lunch? We even tried to have people do FaceTime lunches, at least to have some visual of each other. But I really do think that's a key that you were saying about reminding ourselves, if we are going to continue down this road for whatever time for your business, that we have to figure out ways to connect and to communicate If not, we're going to drop into the land of text, and that's just not healthy.
No. And we also really need to know when and how to disconnect, because it's very easy to get an email at 10 o'clock at night. You're sitting in the living room with the family, you're watching TV, and all of a sudden you get up and leave and go answer the email.
Right.
You should not do that.
Right.
It's really not smart, partly because you're not really fully present when you get those emails. Setting aside a time for work, and this is when I work, even if those hours, like for me, I take a break in the middle of the day and I go out to the barn and I ride my horse. And that's what I do to relax. And so my clients all know that that's a time that I'm not available. I may work later at night, but it's on purpose. It's on schedule. It's not something that I just let happen. So that our work, this whole idea of work-life balance has been crap for a long time, but it's really about making your choices. We've always brought home to work, and we've always brought work home.
Right.
But figuring out how we're going to break that up as far as how we work and when we work, and making sure that we get appropriate breaks.
Right.
Using something like the Pomodoro method, where you work for 20 minutes and then you get up and you walk around, you get a cup of coffee, whatever it is, take a break, let your mind rest, and then go back to work. And that's one way to really break up your day.
Well, it's been interesting when I first was at home as well. It was interesting. It was a little easier when my children were home remote school as well, because I would stop to go help make lunch and I'd have lunch with them. So it forced me to take that break. And then after, at the end of the day, they would be finished and I would say, okay, I'm done with work and let's cook dinner and we'll have dinner. And then maybe I went back for an hour, but it was after they had settled in or whatever. I find it interesting now where they're not here. They're back in physical school. And so I have to stop myself. My wife will be here. We have to stop and have lunch, or if she's off doing something, I'll look up and already it's 2:30 and I didn't stop. So that's where I think this idea of burnout is happening, is we don't have to commute anymore. So we can just walk in, cup of coffee, sit down and just dive in. There's no more prepping on the road in, or on the flip side, decompressing on your half an hour commute home. So you're not just walking out of your office or whatever, wherever you're working, frustrated because you have no decompression time and you just walk right out and, you're just carrying that all around. So if someone is feeling this idea of burning out and hitting that, so if they were saying, all right, I have to take charge of this now, I'm feeling this, give me a few tips. You mentioned one, purposefully taking breaks. What other things would you have them do to pull back so they don't feel like they're hitting the wall?
Well, burnout is a sneaky thing. And by the time you realize you're in burnout, it's too late. So checking in with yourself periodically through the day. And what I do is I just stop for a moment and go, what am I doing right now? And is this what I'm really should be doing right now in this moment? Am I tired? We don't check in with ourselves. We just try to power through.
Right.
And the more we try to power through, the less skilled we are at whatever it is we're doing, because we're not really there and present doing that thing. So, before you start a project, take a breath, give yourself a moment, go, okay, I'm going to work on this. Turn off your email, turn off Slack, turn off all that stuff for set periods of time, and then check them. Because there's lots of studies about this, but every time you hear your email chime go off, even if you don't go read that email, it stops you for 5 minutes.
Right.
Because your brain wanders off. So when we set up our workspace, when we set up our work day in a way that, okay, I'm going to be present right here for this. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to make this phone call. Silly things like, you're going to have a sales call in a minute. Then get yourself ready for that call. Don't keep answering your email all of those other things that we do to be busy, 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 because busy isn't really helpful to us. We need to think about, I mean, we just think, okay, I'm going to make a call. This is what I'm going to do. Lay out what you expect. And, I was just talking to somebody about really successful negotiation. And part of successful negotiation is being prepared for the conversation. What mindset are you in? What mindset are they in? What are both parties going to accept? And how can we kind of come to an agreement with that? You can't do that if you're not prepared for the conversation.
Yes, I love that. A gentleman who I interviewed a few episodes ago, Garland Vance, wrote a book about getting unbusy, right? And he was saying how being busy is a badge of honor right now, and just working for the sake of work versus saying, is this what I should be doing? And I like the way you said that, are you present 100%, or are you disconnected somewhere? And maybe a trick. What I do is I block out time for a project on my calendar to say this next hour, this next half an hour, and treat it as if it's a meeting with a very important client, and shut everything else down so that I can focus, especially if it's a creative process. If I'm writing something or I'm working on a presentation, the distractions, it's very easy. And to your point, being at home, you just, you hear something and then you look out and, let me go over here. And next thing you know, you're, cleaning the dishes and doing something else. And that's all well and good. But that's not a conscious break. It's just a distraction. So it's really, really hard to do that. I want to pivot a little bit, because I love the fact that your podcast called Mindful Social Podcast, but this idea of mindfulness, I'm sure there's people who are listening who will say, yeah, this is all hokey, hoo-ha, feel good, kumbaya stuff, being mindful. What is that going to do for me? But in your words, when you're saying mindfulness, what does that mean for people?
I hear it all the time from people. They're like, oh, that mindfulness stuff, that sounds really hard. Do I have to meditate? All of these things. And we have so many misconceptions about what it is. And really all it is paying attention. Right now, paying attention. I'm here now. I'm talking to you. This is all I'm doing.
Right.
And when you put it that way, you can start to think how it applies to your tasks. And what you just said is, so fantastic, because we all do that when we're working at home. We're like, oh, I need to start the dishwasher before I start this project. 15, 20 minutes later, you're back at your desk.
Right.
And we need to make conscious choices. Do I need to do this now? What do I need to do now? When I write in particular, I have to do it at the right time of day. If I try to write in the late afternoons, I'm not going to be so thrilled about it. I write mostly in the morning. So I choose the time that I do specific tasks and try to organize around that. But when we're mindful, all we're doing is just being conscious, being aware, and noticing things. As I said, you just check in with yourself periodically through the day. How do I feel right now? Am I stressed? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need to be doing something else? And is what I'm doing right now the most important thing for me to be doing? And if it's, surfing or whatever, maybe it isn't.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I think this is where just what popped into my head when you were saying that is, I think some people think mindfulness is some mystical hurdle that they have to go through. On the flip side, I'm wondering if we've all gotten away, or I don't know the right word, we've lost the ability to just be quiet because we have so many distractions. I was thinking as you were talking, there are days when I go walk my dog where I don't listen to anything. I just let my mind wander and watch what's going on. And other days I'll put something, put a podcast in, or maybe I'm taking a phone call. And it's amazing how much you either miss or feel disconnected with what you're doing, meaning you're not present. So I wonder if it's because we're trying to be busy and we have the technology so we can always be checking the news, checking the weather, listening to a podcast, where we have to pack our days so that we feel like every moment we're accomplishing something. But in reality, getting rid of a lot of things to be present, actually, it's what it sounds like we're talking about here is the more that you can just be present with yourself in the moment, you'll gain more than constantly trying to multitask. Am I right on that sort of track?
Absolutely. You know, the thing is that we have this busyness culture, and we are trained from pretty young to think that if we're not busy, then we're not serving a purpose, and that being quiet is a waste of time.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell you you have to meditate, but I am going to tell you you can meditate in 30 seconds. You can meditate while you're doing a specific task. There's lots of things that we do. You know, a lot of people tell me that they had the biggest breakthrough when they were watering the garden.
Right.
Because they weren't busy, like walking the dog. Those times that we have epiphanies in the shower,
Yes.
we're not doing anything. We're allowing our mind to rest. And when we allow our mind to rest, the mind will go off and it'll keep busy for you. It'll keep thinking of things. But sometimes if you're doing something repetitive like that, like taking a shower, your mind is allowed to be creative. It isn't trying to force you to do anything. And you're not being busy.
No, and I think that's
looking,
and it's funny you say that, is when I'm cooking, because it's a simpler task in a way, or sweeping the garage, where you're saying there's a repetitive task where you're mulching the beds of your garden or whatever it is. There's some physical thing that keeps your body moving, but it allows your brain, versus going back. And I think it's a really important point for everyone who's listening. I don't want it to be glossed over, is this idea of we always have to be busy, and this feeling that if we're not busy, somehow we're less. And I think there's so much on social media of, you have to wake up at 3:00 in the morning, or wake up extra early, or work 17 hours a day, and all. And I know some of those concepts are not meant to do that. If you want to get up early, great. But more importantly, what are you doing with the hours you were up? But I think we're all being hit with this, that we do feel that if we're not having a side hustle, and if we're not working 16 hours a day, and if we're not up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and already have being worked out and done 47 things by the time we have our glass of orange juice, somehow we're falling behind, or we're not as good as we think we are. So how do we balance that? I mean, how would you recommend people deal with all of that onslaught and input of feeling that they're not up to par?
Yeah, we have so much judgment about ourselves, and that's one of the things that we just need to do is check in on that judgment. Really, do I need to be this busy? Do I need to answer this phone call? Are you in control of your life, or are you not?
Right.
Because if you're busy all the time, sometimes people use that as an escape. Maybe there's something that they don't want to deal with in their life right now. Maybe they don't want to deal with their job. Maybe they don't want to deal with something in the family. Maybe there's an illness or something that, they just don't want to deal with. So they get busy, and then they get exhausted, and then they get burned out. And then that one thing that was really important to them that they're avoiding gets bigger and bigger.
Right.
So it's really a cycle that we've created for ourselves. It's like running away.
Well, we keep pushing it down, and eventually, you tamp it down, push it down, distract yourself from it. Eventually it's going to come out, but it's how do you want it to come out? Do you want it to come out where a wave washes over you and you feel a certain way, or do you want it to blow up out of you, which then potentially there's a lot of collateral damage around, be it I dumped or exploded on family or work or coworkers or friends, and it had nothing to do with the reason why I blew up. It's just I can't hold on to this anymore.
Yeah, and that's such an important point, Glenn. We go off on somebody and we just go, wow, I don't know where that came from, but we don't
Right.
stop and think, where did that come from?
Right.
What brought that up? And that's mindfulness. It's, wow, I need to think about that a little bit more. Maybe not in the moment. You don't think about things when you're angry very effectively. So
Mhm.
just come back later and go, wow, what was that about today? This is
Right.
how we grow, is by thinking about where things come from and how they could have been better, or figuring out what the source is and then dealing with the source rather than just letting it lay there, because you'll go off again for something else.
Right. So that's a perfect. I think we're in a good place to pivot. There's a topic that intrigued me when I was doing some research about you, and you talked about being less reactive in stressful situations. Now, so what we were just talking about, it's almost a reverse, where it's not really a stressful situation, but something just triggers us because we've tamped it down. But let's flip that then. Well, let's flip it around now and talk about, leaders. The point of this show is to help people who are in charge. And so here's someone who's taking charge, experienced or new, and they're in a stressful situation. Things may or may not be going the way they want them to go. And, maybe their impulse is to just jump in and figure things out. When you say be less reactive in stressful situations, what do you mean?
When I say be less reactive, it's
Mm-hmm.
more about noticing before you react. And part of mindfulness training teaches us to feel emotions in our body. And this can be very difficult for people. But I know that when I'm about to get reactive, I start to feel a little bit in my chest that gets a little tight. I might feel that, my blood pressure is going up. I might notice that my fists are clenched like this. And I'm stressed now. I should do something. When you find yourself in that position and you recognize that you're doing that, you can relax your hands. You can take an action to reduce that stress before it happens, but you won't notice it unless you're mindful.
Right.
So, checking in all the time. I mean, it's one of the things that is hard for people to do at first, and then later they get practice and they're like, wow, I do it all day. I'll get ready for a phone call. I'll check in with myself so I know I'm in the right place. I will know I'm going to have a difficult conversation, and I will set myself up to have a good conversation. There's all
Right.
kinds of things you can do with positive
But that sounds
neuroplasticity.
like I'm preparing. I know. What happens to
Mhm.
someone where all of a sudden a stressful situation's coming out from nowhere? So there's two parts to this. One is all of a sudden how I react to this that came out
Mhm.
of nowhere, preparing for a stressful phone call. I get that. This comes out. So that's number one. And then the second point is, really, it sounds like what you're saying, the mindfulness training is, once I get through that reaction, I need to take time to look back at how I handled it and what caused it. Some people may see that as weakness, or
Too
as
bad.
right. No, so those situations that are out of your control, meaning I'm walking into
Hmm.
something and there's chaos going on and I have to figure out how to go handle this. How do you
Right.
not be reactive in that moment?
Okay. So there's two stories here. The first one is how we train for these situations is by looking back at previous situations and going, oh, that was what triggered me.
Right.
Oh, I was upset about this and I did that. Okay. So that's part of mindfulness, is to train in advance before you walk into a room of 20 people and they're all going at it. And
Yeah.
you're the leader. You came in with a nice, happy, hey, everybody. Oh,
You're
okay.
like,
What do
what
you
the hell
do?
is going on here?
Exactly. One of the most impactful things you can do when you walk into a room and there's like 20 people and they're going at it is just to stand still for a minute. Give yourself a breath and wait. Because everybody's going to be like, what is she doing? Oh, I was being reactive. And if you've trained your team how to recognize when they're being reactive, but silence is an incredibly powerful thing to stop people, because they suddenly realize, oh, the boss is here and I'm going off. Oh,
Right. I
And
see. I
then you
like
can,
that. I like that. One, it's you can watch what's going on to observe, to get your bearings. As you said, that 1 minute, 2 minutes of silence is your preparation before you respond, because you really don't know what's going on. But
right.
actually, I like that it's a training or a conversation. I remember a workshop I went into, when someone's raising their voice, you lower your voice, because
Mm-hmm.
eventually they go, why am I yelling at this person who's not, they're expecting you to counter with higher and counter with higher, and we're keep going up, versus you go down and all of a sudden they feel embarrassed of, why am I yelling at this person who's just being incredibly calm? So I really like that. That's a really phenomenal tip for all of you leaders out there. If you're walking into a situation where it seems out of control, if you're in customer service and the salesperson and a customer are sort of in a tense situation, don't go in there and try to calm them down going, hey, 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 hey. Just stop and
Mm-hmm.
watch. And all of a sudden it will slowly diffuse a little bit. Then you have your opportunity to go in and start asking questions in order
Right.
to find out what's going on. So then you can figure out what your tactical strategy should be to help resolve this sort of chaos in front of you.
Exactly. And if exactly what you said, if you go in and they're going at it, and you're like, hey, 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 okay, you're being reactive now too. And that
Right.
is not going to calm anybody down.
Right.
So, figuring out, and it's that's why, what I teach is called microdosed mindfulness, because these are all tiny little things that you can train your mind to go into that room and go, okay, I'm going to take 30 seconds to kind of let everybody settle down and get a
Right.
feel for what's going on here. And then I'll be in a better position to calmly ask the questions that need to be asked.
It's almost shifting the power dynamic. If
Totally.
you've seen it where, a teacher walks into a classroom and the kids are all bubbling around and doing things. If they start going, all right, all right, all right, you've raised the tension. But if they just start staring at them and not say a word, eventually everyone goes, whoa, son, why am I the one? I'm standing out and I shouldn't stand out. And then you move it along. So I think that's probably one of the best tips that I've heard in a long time for especially new leaders. They tend to
Mhm.
feel that I have to exert my power as a leader. I always say I come in brandishing my title like a sword, like you should listen to me. I'm the manager. And that just drives more up versus the reason. Let your power come from silence, where
Mhm.
everyone
Your
then
real
will look
power.
your real power, and then they'll turn around and look at you to say, all right, I need your help now to figure this out. They may turn around and then start explaining what's going on to you. And
Mhm.
same thing, just be quiet and listen and let everyone talk. And then you can start it. But you've allowed your power just by your presence and your silence. Again, you're being present. And I think that keeps going back to what you said earlier of mindfulness is really being present where your feet are. That's what I always say. Am I present where my feet are? And if you
Mhm.
are, then you can really watch, you can really listen, you can really respond and help move a situation forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I want to make it very, very clear. These things don't happen immediately. It's something
Right.
that you have to practice, and so like I
Mm-hmm.
said before, if a situation goes wrong, don't judge yourself for it.
Right.
Step back, give yourself some space, and then go, okay, what could I have done differently? And don't make it about, oh, I can't believe I did that. Okay, it's over. It's water under the bridge. Get over yourself
Right.
and go back and go, okay, how can I handle this differently? It's about training. And it has to start somewhere, and you're not going to be mindful the first or the third or the 23rd time perfectly, but it's a practice.
Well,
And, taking it in.
I like your idea of the micro dose where we're taking baby steps of I felt good for this minute, this 30 seconds.
Mhm.
To your point is it's a practice and it's a skill. And some days you're going to do well, but the best leaders and the people who perform very well do take time to go back and look at a situation, not judgmental, but to go look at their actions to say what worked, what didn't work, what do I have to tweak, and then be keep going using the word mindful, be mindful that the next time we're going to start with a different strategy because we learned something. If we constantly are just make the same mistake over and over and over again, well, then we're not learning anything. We're fighting what really, I wonder if then you end up fighting what you're starting to learn. And there's an internal battle between, well, no, this really worked. No, be quiet. I'm smarter than you. And you have this internal fight going on. Okay. I am curious. I want to pivot now and talk a little bit about you, because this mindfulness, where you are today, as you said, not where you were, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you were Silicon Valley running an agency, digital agency, as you said, got funding, we have people, things are going well. And then, the crash aside, which was, always can be very similar to COVID in this time frame, it pushes things or accelerates things. So my question to you is, where did this come from? Right, where we are today. And do you think that if the crash didn't push you remote, were you heading to that way anyway? So I'd love to understand how we got to this point, because it's fascinating from running agency work and we have all this to, no, here we're in a completely different direction.
Well, the agency did transform quite a few times. We started as an online community for people working in the restaurant industry. That evolved to a web development company. And then eventually that evolved into social media management and strategy. And it was really in the social media management and strategy part that we really made a big pivot. Because at that point, I was working with quite a few individuals who were running their own businesses. They were all contractors. They were all working from home. And we were really successful. And it was really where we were at the height of our success, because social media was taking off like mad and everybody wanted it and nobody knew how to do it. But over time, I started to realize that my real core love is community. It's dealing with the people. And it was always about humanity and people working together. And over time, social media got more into a marketing tool, more into kind of that old Mad Men style of pushing stuff down people's throats because they needed it.
Sure.
And I got pretty disconnected from that. That's not the way I wanted to do business. And I changed a lot of clients, but I was still finding clients that was the only way they wanted to work. And I just was not fulfilled. And at the same time, someone in my family got sick and I became a caregiver. And I started to really check in with my priorities. And I was really burned out because I was running the agency and I was being a caregiver and all of these other things in crazy Silicon Valley.
Sure.
And I started exploring mindfulness as a way to take care of myself. And the more I learned about it, the more excited I got, because I found that it could handle my stress. And little by little, I started doing what I call, mind focus training, if you don't like the word mindfulness, and really learning how to focus on what was important. And it wasn't social media anymore.
Right.
It wasn't working with the clients that I was working with anymore. So I shut down the agency and I opened a consulting and coaching business. And now I do corporate training and retreats and workshops and all kinds of things that just really transform people, help them be better in how they deal with life and with work. And that has changed my entire life in such a good way. I'm so much calmer these days than I was then.
Well, I think, and I want to keep diving into this, because what's interesting is sometimes we make changes because we have to, meaning that life is pushing us to that. So you have a successful business, but the caretaking and the burnout and all of a sudden. So how did you find the mindfulness? Was it, what was the actual thing that got you down the road? Was it a workshop? Was it a video? Was it a book? How did you all of a sudden go from, even though you sensed it, I liked community, but we went to the advertising and ads till we're, blue in the face here. What was the trigger point to get to the mindfulness?
Desperation. Quite honestly, you get to a point when you're so burned out that you turn to everything. And I turned to a lot of things that weren't good for me before I got there.
Right.
And then I really kind of on a whim did a 3-day retreat, and which was amazing because I realized that, gosh, I can take 3 days and take care of myself and focus on what I need. And that is something that I didn't think I would do. I thought it was woo-woo and silly, and why am I doing this? But I need the time. So I certainly did not have the mindset that I have now. I was very like, oh, I don't know, this is just going to be crazy. But 3 days in the mountains, okay, I can do this.
Right. Well, were you looking at it more as a vacation break than it was, this is going to transform me? Or was that a surprise when you came out of it?
It was a total surprise. I really didn't expect it. I thought, I'm just going to go and I'm going to chill and it's going to be good. And I just really need a break right now. I have to have a break. And then once I kind of recognized that almost everybody that was at that retreat, and it was not a retreat for people who were in stress, but almost everybody at that retreat was in really extreme stress, and they were there for the same reasons I was.
Right.
And so we got to talking, and I realized that, some of them were Silicon Valley executives, some of them had families that were in challenge. There were a lot of different things. But what brought people together was, I just need something to make me feel better, to make me feel whole. So then I started studying mindfulness in a lot of different ways, and compassion and positive neuroplasticity and positive psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy. I studied a lot of stuff over the last few years, and it really has made everything better for me. And it's made things better for my clients as well. And it just feels really good. I feel like I found my next calling, my next career.
Right. Well, what I like about that, and I'd love your opinion on this, because I think, I don't want to say just high achievers, but I think it's most people who are just trying to get through the day. We talked about it earlier, being busy. Taking real time for yourself is seen as selfish, or weak's not the right word, but I think we feel that if I take time, I'll speak for myself, taking time for myself. My wife is always on me. Just go, you need your time. And I have my time where I go, but for a long time I didn't, because I kept saying, well, me sitting down for an hour and just reading a book for myself, which I enjoy, I could be doing X, right? You have that battle of constantly, well, I could be doing this, or I should be doing more for the family, or I could be doing more for the company, or I could, and you go to, well, I could go work. How do you, what would your, I can't say advice, because again, someone's going to say, oh, it sounds all good and easy, but what is that? What's that power? Why is it so important that we do take stock and we just sort of find what we like to do and do it? Like, what's that real benefit?
Well, let me take that from a little different tack. Something that I did, and something that I know a lot of people have done, is when they get burned out and they get stressed, they're like, okay, I'm going to go dancing. I'm going to go to a bar. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to come home and everything's going to be better in the morning. No one feels better in the morning.
No.
It does not work. And so they actually make things worse, because now they've accelerated the burnout and they've made themselves feel bad. And I think we've all done that in some capacity. And when we do something like, we take a day and we go for a walk in the woods, we always feel better.
Right.
Even if it's taking us away from work, taking that break just for ourselves feels better. It's a practice. We need to develop a habit of taking those breaks whenever we decide we need to take them. Not every Saturday, I'm going to go for a walk in the woods. because there's going to be all kinds of stress around that. There's going to be all kinds of reasons that you can't do it. But if you do make yourself do it, you're going to feel better. And then once we start to feel better, we start to want more of that. But it's not until we take that small step, like I did, to go, okay, I got to do something about this. And it can be an hour. It can be reading a book. It isn't watching Netflix for 8 hours, because that's really a maladaptive behavior. We need to find a way to be with ourselves and create that habit.
Yeah, my wife was doing during COVID, she was doing paint by numbers. And she said that was her time, something, again, like we were saying earlier, a repetitive action that occupied a portion of the brain so the other portion of the brain could go off and just think things. And I think that's just listening to that. What I loved about it was it's finding something, doing it for yourself. Sometimes, I don't want to say force yourself, but if the choice is, well, I could go work or go walk, but be careful that it isn't becoming such a ritualized task that you lose the joy of actually doing that. Now I'm going to walk for an hour, but then your purpose is, I can't wait to get done with this walk because then I've checked it off the box and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to go work. You've lost that ability because you're no longer present. You're counting down the minutes to be done. So you're not doing it. But I think from what you're saying and what it sounds like, again, it's just this ongoing building of presence, listening to yourself, appreciating that silence and time for yourself is as valuable because it charges you up. It allows you to be more present for all of your other things that you have on your list because you've recharged your battery in a real way. Not forced. I'm going to the beach today and everything's done. Now I can go for, I think we need more of this. And as you said, that's why I love that word, micro doses. I think we need 100 micro doses over the course of time every day versus one power pack day of vacation, because to your point, then we feel like that solves all of our problems.
Yeah. Well, and who hasn't gone on vacation? And like the 5 days leading up to the vacation are packed with work. Right. And then you get to vacation and you chill out, except the last couple of days when you're like, okay, I'm going to get back to work. I'm going to get this done and this done and this done. And you get back to work and you're hammered again. And it has not relaxed you because you're still exhausted. So when we take little breaks, they're actually more impactful. In our house, we take overnights or we'll take a couple of days, just whenever. We're feeling a little fried.
Let's go somewhere.
Get a hotel room, stay there, and just relax. And it's just one day. But it's amazing how powerful that can be if we allow ourselves to do it. And even just 10 minutes, a walk around the block.
I have a neighbor and we've grown close over the 10 years or so we're here, and he's always worked at home. He and his wife both work at home, but I see them walking together or by themselves at least 2 or 3 times a day. And he says, that's the way I do my thinking. That's the way, but that he has those micro moments for himself, and he is the most level-headed, calm. I'm sure he gets upset, but when you talk to him, he's very grounded, very centered, because he has this ritual of refueling himself or treating that time for himself so that he can be present for everything else. And I like that. I think we all do wait for the big vacation. And usually let's say you're gone for a week, it takes you 3 days till you finally are relaxing. And now you're on your 4th day and you feel, oh my God, I finally feel really good. And then you're going, oh, I only have 2 days left. And now I try to jam it all in and I'm more exhausted when I come back. And that, I'm sure you've heard it. People go, I need a vacation for my vacation because of all of this. So I want to ask you, as we're sort of moving into the tail end of this, your latest book. Now you've written 7 books, which is amazing. I love the title, When Life Hits the Fan. So talk to me about how that book came to be and what you hope people will get out of it when they read the book.
It's really a very personal journey of what it was like for me becoming a caregiver, finding myself burned out, trying to do too much, and discovering mindfulness. And I interviewed a whole bunch of people for the book to understand what they were struggling with too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I give tips on how to bring mindfulness into your life to deal with that reactivity, to deal with the triggers, to deal with the exhaustion, all of the things that happen to us in our lives that, just to help caregivers take care of themselves, because they often don't care for themselves because
Right.
they get so wrapped up in the job, in caring for the person they love.
Right.
And that's understandable, but it's not really helpful because sometimes you get really obsessive about it and then you're not helping that person. If you're fried, you're not helping anybody. So figuring out.
I think that's that. Again, folks, I hope you're listening to that, because again, it's easy sometimes when we get going to skip over. But if your battery is drained, how are you going to be that I think goes back to what we were talking about when you become reactive and stressed in situations. And people always say you're so tired you just snap, because you don't have the mental capacity nor the energy to be thoughtful, to be mindful, because you're so tired and your emotions are so on edge. Anything is going to trigger you off. So I think that idea of, it's not selfish to take care of yourself first. I hate that. I don't mean it in like, over top of someone, but I think you have to be consciously thinking that taking care of myself is just as important, if not more important, because how else can I be fully present for all those who depend on me if I'm fried out?
Absolutely true. Because we all know that if we go into a situation that's going to be really chaotic and very hard, and we're already fried when we get there, we're not going to be helpful. There's going to be a mess. And the thing is that, and my next book is called Microdosed Mindfulness. And that book is really about how can we take a little microdose here and a microdose there to settle our minds, to allow that sense of calm to be there, because that gives us that little break in the storm. Then we can do so much more if we can just learn to just take that moment and allow that moment to be.
Yeah, it's that slowing down. I think it's that idea, and I like that. It's slowing down to be present without constantly needing stimulation from outside. I remember when I would commute back and forth to the office, it's about 45, 50 minutes each way, on days where it was just, I used a lot of energy today. I would drive home with no radio, no podcast, nothing, just quiet to allow it to unwind, because if I kept adding more in, like let's listen to a business book or a podcast or even just radio or music, I was getting more tired by the time I came home. And I found when I walked in, I definitely didn't want to be around anybody, or I wasn't really pleasant to be around, or I'd just be really quiet and what's wrong with that, versus taking that time for yourself when you need it. And we all know it. That's the fascinating thing. We all know it, but it's the guilt of taking the time for ourselves. I think that's the biggest struggle, that we all have to sort of get over ourselves on that and listen to ourselves and treat the voice inside our head, which says you need to rest, and rest.
Yeah. And to really allow yourself that time to focus. And, a lot of us aren't commuting, but we're still going back and forth a lot. And, when you think about it, you're coming home after a really long, hard day. Are you going to bring that all home to the family or not? And if you're not going to bring, one of the tricks that somebody taught me a while ago is, when you get home, sit in the car for a moment, take a couple of breaths, and look at your house and be grateful that you have the house, your family's there, they're waiting for you. They probably aren't waiting for you, but they could be. And, just give yourself a moment to be grateful. I'm home. And just allow that. Doesn't have to be more than a few seconds, but that shifts your attitude. It shifts your way of being before you walk in the door, so that you don't bring all of that aggravation that you picked up at work home with you. Just be there and be present with the family, be in your home, and allow yourself that moment of happiness.
I think that's great. There was a gentleman who I interviewed. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Glenn Lundy, and one of his sole purposes is helping people start their day. As he said, if you could start your day in a better way, then you'll have a better day. And so he's written something called the Morning Five. And one of those is, no phone, right? No, don't hit the snooze button, no phone, right? So you don't start with stimulus, good or bad, doesn't matter. And one of his tenets is gratitude. Take 5 minutes to just say, what am I grateful for? And it could change every single day. But once you come out of it, or as he says, if you start your day grateful you woke up, grateful for your health, grateful I have a roof over my head, grateful for whatever it is. Once you start realizing all the things you have, then if something's going on, you can deal with it. Because for a lot of us, as we move through the world, there's a lot of what we don't have. Going back to that you're not busy enough, you're not working hard enough, you're not as successful as this. We get into what we don't have. And if we stopped for a moment, as you said, I love that, pulling up in your driveway and looking at your house and saying, I have a house. I have a roof over my head. I have people in there who love me. There's food in the refrigerator. Those little things, I always say, some people would love to trade places with you and have the problems that you're complaining about. So when you think it's that bad, there's people who would trade places with you in 2 seconds. So listen, I could chat with you. I love these conversations that fly, because I really think I really liked what we talked about today. I think it'll be very, very helpful for our guests who are listening in on this. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. We'll link up all your books, and we'll talk about where they can find you in a moment. But we end our show all the time just chatting about what I call the 5 questions. Call them the one, meaning one answer. Just tell me what pops into your head right out of the chute. So you ready? You ready for those?
Sure, go for it.
All right.
I'll try to get present first. Yeah.
Okay, we'll both get present. Okay, so what is one skill that people would not know that you possess?
I hate this question. I used to be a butcher.
Look at that. See, that's awesome. I like that one. So we'll stay with then butcher food. One type of food that you can't live without, you're not willing to give up. What is it?
Steak.
There you go. Butcher steak. We're gone. We have a theme here. We're going on a
Moving
theme.
on.
We like that. I'm afraid to ask this next one. What's one place in the world that you haven't been to that you'd love to travel to?
Morocco.
Oh, that's a good one. What is something that you are reading right now, or you listening to or watched, that is inspiring you or touched you, that you would recommend to the audience?
I just started Jane Goodall's new book, and it's all about hope in really difficult times. And it's just amazing. Sorry, one answer. Hope.
No. But listen, we can do. That's good. If I got all of your friends and family in a room and asked them to describe you with one word, what's the one word they would use?
Honest.
Oh, I like that. And then our last question before we wrap up and ask where they can contact you. If there was one thing out of all of this conversation that we had today, and we talked about a lot of things, what's the one thing that you hope the audience walks away with?
Take a microdose of mindfulness. 1 minute.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. And this has been fascinating, and I'm really glad we connected and you took time to be here with me. I really appreciate that. So how can the audience connect with you and find you? As I said, we'll list your book in the show notes, but where, if they wanted to reach out and find more about you and what you do, where would they go?
Anywhere on social media. I'm J Fouts, which is a lot of places, or just go to my website, janetfouts.com.
Great. Love that. Love that. So again, thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it. So audience, you know the drill. Please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, Apple, or if you are Android users over there on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, you can jump over to the YouTube channel so you can watch both of us have this conversation as well. Please share it out. There's a lot of people who could use and really need to hear what we talked about today. Please make sure that you rate the podcast, comment. I'd love to hear what you feel about this. Again, I appreciate that you spent time with us today. It means a lot. I know there's a lot of places for you to consume content. And as I say at the end of every show, you're in charge. Now, Janet gave you a few more things, tools, strategies to help you become more successful, both personally and professionally. Thanks again so much. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks again for being part of this today.
Thank you, Glenn. It was wonderful. Thanks.
Great.
It was fun.